Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grow RDH podcast. My name is Katie and I am your host. I am a dental hygienist from South Dakota and I dabble a little bit in education. I work clinically at a corrections facility and I like to make these podcasts because sometimes I think it is more conversational in a way that we can talk about some of the standards and issues that we deal with. And most recently, we've been talking about Perio. We did sort of a series on Perio staging and grading. So if you're interested, check that out. And we're going to talk about a few different standards of care type of things around topics that I think we all like to talk about. And one of those hot topics is implants. And so that's going to be the focus of today's podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by my Perio workshop, and I have a Perio workshop coming up. It's July 13th, and so I guess it's not really a sponsored podcast, but I do want to bring that up because I love staging and grading, and I have been to tons of CEs about staging and grading, and what I think is great about workshop settings is that you get to work the case piece by piece, and it's helpful to work it in a group setting. It's a way to look at the steps you're taking to stage and grade and really break everything down. And so we'll be doing that at this workshop. July 13th, check it out on roadrdh.org. So I will link that in the description of this episode. But we're going to transition into talking about implants. And why I think that this is a good conversational topic is because so much of what we hear about implants is varied. This is similar to lasers. We did an episode on lasers prior, and I'll continue to update these episodes, right, as new research comes out. And I wanted to dive a little bit into implants because when we teach implants to the students, it is tricky. There is not great research out there in terms of instrumentation, and especially open access, right? Open access articles that you guys can access if you're not associated with an institution or have a membership to a journal. Open access articles, I think, are amazing, and more journals should be open access because it is getting information to the masses. But so I did a search and I came up with very low. But I do think that I'm going to keep digging and hopefully come up with part two. But what makes this tricky, what makes implant education tricky is because you will talk to 20 different dentists and you will get 20 different answers. And that's true for dentists that place implants. It's true for dental surgeons. It is so tricky to be able to really dig through the myths and the true information of what implants need. And when I did my search, I was looking at articles all the way back from the open access ones I could find were from 2013, 2014. We know that a lot has changed since then. There's not a whole lot of open access articles or lit reviews that are done recently. I did find one from 2021, I think. Let me check. I have like 3 different tabs open on my screen. This one is from 2021. So I'm going to link both of the articles that I'm going to refer to today in the description notes. So go ahead and check that out when you're done. But first we're going to talk just about Perio basics when it comes to implants, right? The essentials, how we take care of them, how we clean them, how we maintain overall health. And so we're first going to start with assessment, right? This is important to regularly monitor. As soon as that's placed, we want to watch for osseointegration, making sure that it is healing appropriately, and that will be done with the surgeon that placed it, or the dentist that placed it. And so as you're kind of working with the patient, as they're going through that process, you're just going to really have to keep in touch with the dentist that's placing it. And so I can't stress that importance enough. We still teaches to students that if they encounter a patient with an implant, we do want them to consult with the dentist that placed it. And sometimes that is not their patient of record or their dentist of record. And so sometimes that can get tricky because we want to make sure we can do that. But if they have multiple implants, that's multiple phone calls, and sometimes we just don't have the time for that. It doesn't hurt though to do follow-ups or to just keep it on record in a chart. If they're a new patient, again, that's tricky. But if they're a patient of record, really just keep open communication and contact with the dentist that placed it. And that is great for collaboration. And it's great for protecting yourself legally, to making sure that you're operating to the designation of what that dentist wants. So we want to regularly monitor it. So when we're talking about progress, we're talking about probing, there is a little bit of controversy going back and forth between, do you use a metal probe or do you use a plastic probe? Again, not a whole lot of research. I found the most recent article I found on this was not open access. I opened it behind like a login, right? So through my institution, I opened it kind of a login. So I couldn't, it's not open access. I can't really share it. But it was really non-significant. There was insignificant results anyway about the preferences and the health of the tissue. It looked at multiple different instruments and there was no statistical significance at all. So it was really a moot point anyway. So what we teach is plastic probes are great for give. They give around the implant. They have a little more flexibility. So if you have that contour, right, implants are more contoured down to the post. And a plastic instrument allows you to sort of fold and bend that way. And so that's really great. I think that either way you do it, if you're using a metal probe, continue to use the metal probe, because the metal probe depth readings are not going to be as accurate, I guess, because you don't have that giver flexibility. You're probably not going to get all the way down to a seal. And so whatever you're doing, I think it doesn't really matter what you're choosing to do based on what your dentist is wanting or what your protocols for implants is. The key, though, is consistency. If you're consistently using the same probe, then every time you probe, those depths should show a baseline, and then every time after that, it's going to show you a picture of how the health is changing or not changing, hopefully, right? Not changing. But it will show you how it's moving. So consistency, I think, for probing, that is my number one recommendation. There's other ways, though, to, I know that sometimes the crowns of the implants can come loose and it has been mistaken as mobility when it's not. So when we're assessing for mobility, what's helpful is using digital manipulation, and to see if it's the crown moving or if it's the whole implant that's moving, and touching and palpating digitally the sides, the buccal and lingual sides of the tooth. That's another really good way to see separation or pus coming out. So if you're sort of pressing and manipulating, you can kind of see the health of the tissue that way. And if it's, implants have normally deeper pockets, right? It's totally normal or healthy to see a 4 or 5 millimeter pocket around an implant because of the way that the crown contours to the post. So then we know that that's normal. But that's a lot of extra space, right? So if there's pus or separation happening down at the base, it may be missed. And by digitally palpating it can really help you sort of manipulate that to come out. We might be able to see it a little bit better. So that is one recommendation as well for assessing gingival health. I want to say too, we talked about this on our staging and grading episode, but according to the new classification system, the staging and grading system, every single implant should get its own individual diagnosis. So if you have 3 different implants in your mouth, each of those implants, so by number, so tooth number 3 or implant number 3, should get its own individual implant. And so the 2 options, well, 3, I guess, we have implant health, which means that the tissues are healthy. The second option would be peri-implant mucositis, and that's the implant equivalent to gingivitis, right? So the tissues around the implant are inflamed, they might show bleeding. swelling, the same types of clinical signs of gingivitis is going to be evident in peri-implant mucositis. And then finally, we have peri-implantitis, which is the implant equivalent to periodontitis. This means that not only are the gingival tissues inflamed and bleeding, but the loss goes down into the bone. And so you'll lose bone around that implant, and that would be a diagnosis of peri-implantitis. So that's another piece of the assessment, is making sure that you're giving each individual implant its own diagnosis, and that's really important. For radiographs, we want to at least take radiographs once a year on every implant. That's a periodical, right? You want to pee every implant once a year. And leading up to the healing time of that year mark, when it's supposed to be really stable, it's about a year after it's placed, we want to make sure that we're following whatever the dentist is doing. So they might be taking their own 3, 6, 9-month pictures based on their protocol. Again, 20 different dentists, 20 different answers is my experience with implants. But whatever their protocol is, let them do that. Get them to that year mark of where, yes, it is osseointegrated, it's healthy. And then after that year, then it's sort of like you're up to the plate. And once a year, we should be testing with a PA. So that kind of falls under the umbrella of the assessment and diagnosis piece of implants. Now we're going to talk about instrumentation, and this is where it gets a little bit fuzzy when it comes to the research. So anytime we want to clean the implant, right, we want to instrument the implant. Either that's for, just a regular prophylaxis, or maybe you see peri-implant mucositis and you need to do some debridement in the area. We want to make sure that we're debriding it based on the dentist protocol or recommendations for that implant, but also there are layers of standards of care, right? And the first thing I want to say is calculus that's on the metal of an implant is not hard to get off. It typically takes, like, the instrumentation stroke to remove that is almost like a rubbing or like an exploring walking stroke. It does not take lateral pressure and heavy-handed instrumentation to remove the calculus. And we don't even have to instrument if we don't feel it, right? The best way, I think, to explore an implant is using the floss method. The floss method is when you wrap the floss around and you do a seesaw motion almost like you were taking a towel. We got out of the pool and you take your beach towel and you like dry your back off, right? So when you rub that floss against the tooth, if it comes out smooth, there's no hard buildup. And if it comes out shredded, that's a sign that there's hard buildup or an overhang of cement. And so that's when you're going to get your instruments out. But again, if it's calculus, it's going to come off very easy. The application of your instrument does not need to be with a lot of pressure. It will come off very easily. So I want to say that first, because I want us to just sort of realize that whatever we choose to use, if we're using it in the way that it's meant to be used, which is not much pressure, it shouldn't do a whole lot of damage, right? Because a lot of dentists now are saying you should be able to use metal. And I have not found very much research to back that up. And I've asked even the dentists that are recommending this, like, where in the literature is it showing this? And again, some articles, it's just like lasers. Some articles show very minor improvements with metal instruments. Some show that it does damage and scratch the implant surface, making it more likely to fail. And so what I would say is that if there's any chance of failure, why risk it? Especially if you have titanium instruments anyway. And the benefit of using titanium instruments is that it's safer. So why risk it? Why would you want to put yourself in a position? It's fine to say, yeah, this dentist said use metal, so I used metal. But is that going to hold up in a legal case against you of if a standard of care was to use titanium and you use metal? Would that hold up in a legal case? And so I always look, because I teach ethics and jurisprudence, I always look at it through a lens of, would this hold up in a case against me? And I don't know if it would. I truly don't. I'm not a lawyer. All I know is that the evidence does not seem to be very clear on it. And so if the evidence is saying that titanium works great, which it does, and I'll share that article, I think that is a great place to start. In terms of plastic, what do we know about plastic? I hope that pretty much everybody has discontinued plastic. Plastic is not necessarily bad. We know it's not going to damage the surface of the implant, but one, it's really bulky. They don't get under the tissue very well. And two, it has been there's research to show that there has been cases where little shards of plastic are actually left behind down in the package, causing an inability to heal. And so causing irritation. So the plastic shards and the bulkiness, and I don't know if anybody ever even liked plastic instruments to begin with. So goodbye plastic. And then in terms of, titanium, I personally, everything I found in the literature is that is the standard of care, because the adaptability to the implant body and not damaging it is just, the research is there. And so I think as long as you're sort of aware of that. Now, going to ultrasonics or debridement in terms of irrigation, again, we've had some dentists tell us, you just use the Cavitron. Use Cavitron. Ugh, that freaks me out. I've done that because the dentist told me to, and that tooth, the crown came loose, and it freaks me out. I'll never use a Cavitron again on an implant. But again, the research isn't there. The crown that I'm speaking about would have came loose anyway. It wasn't me that did it, but it just freaked me out because I had used a Cavitron. And, they, again, going back to plastic, they had those plastic sleeves that would cover the Cavitron tip, left shards behind, plastic shards, and then they were really bulky and you couldn't get them out in the pocket. That was my experience. If you like them and use them, good on you. But I could not use them very well. They did not irrigate very well either. And then finally, this standard of care, air polishing. So much research has come out to say that air polishing is right now the standard of care with glycine. Glycine is very low abrasive. It is very biocompatible, and it's great for biofilm removal. The new air polishing systems are not as bad as they used to be. I think air polishing went away for a while, and then it came back with a vengeance. And man, I love it. Patients seem to love it. It has just been great. And I hope that this is going to become more mainstream, because I think most of the time it's the biofilm that's causing the periimplant mucositis more than focus. I don't personally, this is just my clinical experience. There's not a lot of focus around implants. And I tell the students that if they're doing a floss technique and it's coming out smooth, air polish should be done. Leave it alone. The less you mess with that, the better. And that air polishing just does wonders for gum health. I've clinically seen it, and it is just amazing. So my take is that air polishing is going to be the next new thing for implants, and hopefully it's going to be a trend that really catches on. I know that the systems are sort of spendy, and so if they are not, they don't have it in their office, that is a barrier, right? It's a barrier to standard of care, not access. Standard access care. Standard of care is a barrier, not having the tools that you need. And if you're seeing a lot of implant patients, I would make the case that the air polisher is fastly becoming the standard of care in implant cleaning and debridement and irrigation. finally, the thing that I want to talk about last is chlorhexidine. Chlorhexidine is widely used as an antimicrobial. But I heard this at a CE and I was just like, oh my goodness, that's scary. And then I was like, everybody's going to be talking about this. And then I don't know, like a year went by and I was like, whatever happened to this? I started teaching that chlorhexidine is damaging. And then I didn't really hear a whole lot about it. And then as I was doing the research for this episode, I did find more articles to come out about it. So I'm going to link the article that I'm going to refer to, but chlorhexidine has been known to be damaging to the implants. It has shown that the surface topography on the implant can be damaged or tarnished, I guess, because it's a metal, right? It's a chemical reaction. Also, chlorhexidine has cytotoxic effects on osteoblasts. And so if that implant is in the process of osseointegration and you're using chlorhexidine, the chlorhexidine can actually inhibit the use or make the osteoblast not work as well. And so it's going to hinder the healing versus help and keep the bacterial counts low. And so I never would recommend, if you're using chlorhexidine as a pre-procedural mouth rinse and that patient has an implant, I wouldn't use it. Use something else that's a little more mild. And if that's something that you're not using, don't worry about it. But even patients that do have a lens, I would just sort of educate them on why it's bad and why they really should steer clear or be a little bit more aware of the products that they're putting in their mouth and making sure that they understand that chlorhexidine can actually damage the implant. So that is the last thing I wanted to talk about. And in terms of maintenance, this is going to be the same as the Perio maintenance schedule, right? So every 3 to 6 months based on individual receptors, including the prognosis, right? So if you're dealing with a Perio patient and they have grade B or C, you're probably going to want to start every 3 months, at least to see how their tissues respond to the implant, how they're able to take care of the implant, what their home care is like. All of those things can really impact the gingival tissues around the implant. And so it could be 3 to 6 months based on risk factors, capability of home care, and how well they are at sort of following through. So that is the episode for today. I'm going to link the 2 articles that I was referring to in the show notes. So they're both open access. So you can open them up and check them out and see for yourself. I would love to hear again from you, just to hear about what your experience is with in terms of dentist recommendations for implants, because it to me is just so wildly different. It's so wildly different, and it's frustrating because it's hard when things aren't clear and when the research isn't readily accessible. It's hard because a lot of these new journal articles are sort of behind these logins, and that's a whole other issue that I'm not going to get into. But finding really good open access journals, finding dentists that you really trust and that do their due diligence about how they place, when they place, how they care for their implants. And I think just keeping an open line of communication between your dentist and if it's a different dentist that's placing it, keeping everybody in the loop, sharing statuses and asking for advice or asking for clinical help when you're experiencing an implant that just doesn't seem to be responding the way you want it to respond. So I hope this helped. And again, hopefully this is just a conversation starter. I would love to hear your experiences, hear what you know that clinically works, hear how many of you are using the air polisher, because I find that very interesting. I really hope that that's becoming a trend again. I love the air polisher and I love using it, and I love the patient's reactions to using it because it feels fresh, just like you feel after you get couch fun. I love getting couch fun. I love getting air polish. So hope this finds you well. Have a great week, and we will be back next week with a new episode. If you like this episode and you want to support the podcast, please like and subscribe, share with a friend. I appreciate any listens or downloads, and I just want to keep the conversation going. I will see you next week.